Last year, the federal government allocated $129 million to help students experiencing homelessness get an education. That aid comes from a federal law that often falls short for rural youth. A Midwest Newsroom investigation found the majority of rural school districts in Missouri, Iowa, Kansas, and Nebraska undercount homeless students. The Midwest Newsroom's Kavahn Mansouri has more.
In essence, the McKinney-Vento Act ensures students have equal access to education regardless of their housing situation. The 1987 law requires schools to enroll students who are homeless, provide them with transportation to school, and give them school supplies, among other services. To secure those resources, public schools have to identify eligible students and apply for federal funding. A Midwest Newsroom investigation found only 50 public school districts in Missouri, Kansas, Iowa, and Nebraska receive funding from the McKinney-Vento Act. That's too low, according to Barbara Duffield, executive director for the nonprofit Schoolhouse Connection.
School is really the only the only universal institution within communities that has that broad ability to identify and connect and provide support.
Duffield's group works to bridge the gap between students experiencing homelessness and school districts. She says schools struggle to recognize students with unstable housing.
If you don't get identified, then you don't get the support that you need to attend school on a regular basis, to be successful in school.
And she says missing out on an education makes it more likely students continue a cycle of homelessness. Across Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska, 525 public school districts reported 0 homeless students in the 2021-2022 school year. An analysis by the Midwest Newsroom comparing data from the Free and Reduced Lunch Program and census data shows it's likely there are homeless students the schools are missing. In rural communities, it can be even harder to identify students who are homeless due to the lack of official services for people without housing, according to Kenya Haynes, a program specialist with the National Center for Homeless Education. Haynes works in rural communities to help school districts implement McKinney-Vento.
Sometimes there is a misunderstanding of what the federal definition of homelessness is. People might not understand things about inadequate housing and being doubled up or fleeing unsafe situations.
Last year, the federal government allocated $129 million for McKinney-Vento grant funding. That's for the entire country. Every school district in the country must name a liaison to identify students without permanent housing through enrollment documentation, interviews, and observation. Maureen Tabasco is the homeless education coordinator for Kansas. She works with liaisons throughout the state who often wear a lot of hats.
I spoke to one liaison who was an assistant superintendent. He was driving the bus. He was working the lunchroom. He was mopping floors.
Those same liaisons must compete through grant applications to receive McKinney-Vento funding. Duffield says it puts well-funded school districts at an advantage over rural schools with fewer resources to identify homelessness.
I think the challenge is almost circular. You don't see the students, so you don't think that they're there, so you don't set aside enough funding to have the capacity to go out and find the students. So we see that circle happening over and over and over again.
In the 2021-2022 school year, Missouri received roughly $1.6 million in McKinney-Vento funding, while Kansas received $750,000, Iowa $697,000, and Nebraska $447,000. Duffield says recent additional funding from the American Rescue Plan Act, specifically for homeless students, helped make more school districts aware of McKinney-Vento.
Yeah, this is doable. This can be changed. There's nothing like throw your hands up in the air. This isn't unsolvable. This is intractable. We can move the needle here. We can definitely move the needle.
Still, Duffield says she hopes more educators learn how to identify housing instability among their students, and that legislators prioritize McKinney-Vento when planning the budget. For the Midwest Newsroom, I'm Kavahn Mansouri.
The Midwest Newsroom is a collaboration between NPR and member stations in Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska.